Welcome to the Random Bites podcast, available on Spreaker.com, iTunes, Google Play, and just added to iHeartRadio. A new podcast every day featuring interviews and a unique take on the world we live in. So sit back, relax, and enjoy Random Bites. Here is your host, Alan Wayne. Welcome to Random Bites, episode number 44. This is Alan Wayne, your host, and tonight I will be talking about Colin Kaepernick and how Colin Kaepernick fucked up. Colin Kaepernick, if you have been living under a rock, is a quarterback, was a quarterback. He's currently a free agent, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Guy had a great career going, led his team to the Super Bowl, actually, won an NFC championship with his team, second-round draft pick out of Nevada, Reno, with amazing skills, an amazing arm, and great footwork, wonderful running ability. I mean, this guy's a playmaker and just one of these quarterbacks that really wows people. Well, he decided last year that he was going to sit in protest, or kneel rather, during the national anthem because he felt that the race situation in America was not kosher, and he was going to protest it by kneeling during the national anthem because he didn't feel like standing for the national anthem. And basically, it was a very profound protest. He was not standing for the country. He was not in agreement with the country. That's what he was protesting. He was protesting racial relations. Now, I have no problem with somebody protesting racial relations. I have no problem with that at all. I have no problem with this national anthem protest. I really don't. I think there are people that are very sensitive about the national anthem and being an American, but part of being an American is the right to protest, is the right to do things like burn flags, step on flags, jump on flags, and basically speak your mind without being persecuted. That's what being an American is all about. So Colin Kaepernick didn't do anything wrong. He just took an unpopular stance. Well, he started a few games last year for the Niners, in fact, most games, and he looked decent. He didn't look like the Colin Kaepernick of old, but certainly that would be difficult to do because Colin Kaepernick of old was phenomenal, and it's kind of hard to keep that going if you've been sitting on the bench for a while. Colin Kaepernick ends up being a free agent after the season's over. His contract runs out. And there are plenty of teams in the NFL who have lost quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks, who have holes in their roster, or who could just use a guy with Colin Kaepernick's skill set, and yet not one team seems to have shown interest in him. Why? Well, last year became kind of a media circus. Instead of focusing on the game at hand, it was focusing on whether Colin Kaepernick was kneeling or standing. It was focusing on the national anthem, not just the game, because the Niners were god-awful last year. It was focusing on something other than the sport, something other than the product. It was focusing on one man's protest. And as the season went on, more and more people in the league who felt that race relations in the country are not at a good point decided to join Colin Kaepernick in his protest. So those guys have jobs. Those guys are still in the NFL. Granted, they were still under contract. Maybe even a couple of them were free agents that were picked up. But Colin Kaepernick was not picked up in the offseason. And you want to know why? Because Colin Kaepernick fucked up. He was the first guy to do it. He was the guy who got all the press. He was the guy who wore the Fidel Castro shirt in Cuba, or not in Cuba rather, but in Miami, and did not know what it meant to the people of that city. The city, which is about, I'd say, 30% Cuban. He put these ideas out there about his personal feelings, and that's fine. But when your personal feelings overshadow your play on the field, it's a distraction. And it's time to basically part ways. No employer, whether it be the NFL or Joe's office shack down in whatever city you're in, wants a distraction. Nobody wants any distractions. They want their employees to focus on the task at hand. For an NFL player, it is doing everything you can to win a football game. For a for Joe's office shack, it's probably selling shares or something like that. But you cannot be a distraction. If what you're doing is distracting from the product that is on the field, then there is an issue. Kaepernick was the first to do it. He was the most publicized. Therefore, he's the one who gets the brunt. Well, considering that his protest was racially motivated, of course the NAACP has to jump in, and they have to say that this is madness, this is terrible, this is not acceptable, and Colin Kaepernick needs a job in the NFL. I don't know how many people in the NAACP actually watch football, or actually know the business structure of football. Every single team, even though they are under the umbrella of the NFL, can sign their own players. They're like independent contractors. They sign their own players with their own money. The NFL sets up a salary cap so that nobody has an unfair advantage, but, well, figuratively, but that's getting off the subject. The NFL sets up a salary cap, but basically that's it. These teams can sign anybody for whatever money that they want, as long as it's within the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the NFL. So the NFL are not the bosses here. The NFL is just the governing league, but they can hand out suspensions and fines and things of that nature to players that do not fit the code of conduct within the NFL or that break the rules somehow. But Colin Kaepernick did neither. He was never suspended. He was never fined. He was never disciplined by the NFL. The NFL has nothing to do with this. You know who has something to do with it? The owners. You know why the owners have something to do with it? They have a stake in this business. They want their business to make money. And they know there are a lot of people who do not like Colin Kaepernick's stance. So the NAACP lobbying for Colin Kaepernick to start for an NFL team is, I don't even know what it's like. It's a unique situation, but it's not going to help his cause. In fact, the way I see it, it looks like Colin Kaepernick, who, by the way, has been good during this whole period, has been silent, hasn't said anything, hasn't drawn any attention to himself because, well, he wants a job, of course, and he's a good quarterback, serviceable. Wouldn't say he's a star anymore, but serviceable. He basically would look like a bitch. And the reason I say that is because what happens when somebody whines and cries on somebody else's behalf and the boss gives in and says, okay, it wasn't because of the talent, it's because they don't want to hear you bitch anymore. And that's the only reason that Colin Kaepernick would be on NFL roster. So these owners have to weigh the two options. Is Colin Kaepernick worth the risk? Is Colin Kaepernick worth the distraction? Will he be able to put up those numbers from yesteryear? Or will he just be kneeling for the national anthem and causing a shit show? Who knows? I certainly don't. I can't predict the future, and I don't know what these owners are thinking. But that is my thought. I think that the owners are basically saying, look, we have a product we have to put out there on the field. We don't need any distractions. We don't need anything keeping us from the task at hand, which is going to the Super Bowl and being successful and being wealthy. We do not want anything to distract from that, especially a guy who is protesting something as sacred to the sport as the national anthem. What is played before every sports game? Baseball, football, basketball, hockey. Most professional sports here in the United States. The national anthem. Now, it means something to a lot of people, especially veterans, especially the very patriotic. And when somebody decides that they are going to protest the national anthem, it strikes them a little raw, which means that Colin Kaepernick is not liked by a lot of people, by a lot of fans. Fans do not want to see Colin Kaepernick starting for their team. Therefore, they will not go to the games. Therefore, that's lost revenue. These owners are thinking of it like a business. But back to the NAACP for a second. Why isn't the NAACP protesting teams? Why aren't they going to teams that have a need at quarterback and saying, why aren't you hiring Colin Kaepernick? You obviously have a need at quarterback. Why don't you give this guy a shot? And the reason being is because the NAACP, it appears, wants to make a scene. The NAACP wants to make a point. So they're lobbying out front of the NFL, as though Colin Kaepernick's being blackballed by the entire NFL. That's not the case. The NFL cannot tell a team to sign Colin Kaepernick. The NFL can also not tell a team to not sign Colin Kaepernick, unless he has broken some sort of rule. He hasn't broken any rules. He hasn't been fined. He hasn't been suspended. The NFL has nothing to do with it. Even though it is a league of teams, the teams operate independently. And if the NAACP just knew that, or at least realized that, instead of making this a big shit show about race, perhaps a team would sign Colin Kaepernick. But right now, all the NAACP is doing is making Colin Kaepernick look like a bitch. Making him look like he is not a man. Like he can't stand and take his punishment, per se. When you take a controversial stance, you have to be able to stand up to the consequences. You have to be able to defend yourself. Colin Kaepernick has not even really defended himself to anybody. He's stayed quiet. You know why? Because he wants a job. Does it mean that he doesn't feel that race relations are bad in this country? No, but he understands the game. He's not going to go out there and basically tell the NFL to go fuck themselves. He's not going to do that. What he's going to do is he's going to sit back and watch it play out and then see if a team wants him. Colin Kaepernick could actually be somebody very helpful for a team this year. But as long as the NAACP and other people are making this about race and controversy, Colin Kaepernick will never see a snap in the NFL. If I were Colin Kaepernick, I'd tell the NAACP to mind their own business, and I would take care of my own business privately by telling the owners, hey, I know I was a distraction, and I may even still kneel for the national anthem, but I will not be a person who is going to be basically distracting from the ability of this team to make something happen, to go to the playoffs. I will play ball. And who knows, maybe Colin Kaepernick will stand for the national anthem next time. But the point is that this is truly Kaepernick's folly. Kaepernick could have protested in so many different ways. Instead, he decided to do it publicly and make a show of himself. And that is what's cost him a job. Thank you for listening to the Random Bites podcast. Remember to subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, and remember to look us up on iHeartRadio. Also, become a part of the radio revolution by donating on Patreon, www.patreon.com. Just look for the Random Internet Radio Show. And don't forget, you can hear the Random Internet Radio Show live every Saturday night only on Spreaker.com. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, always be random.